Vaishnavai Vedai Sangha Padakramopanishadai Dhyayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogina Tasyantam Navidu Sura Suradana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. Om. We salute the Supreme Lord, whose glories are sung by the angels and the celestials, whose praises are chanted by the Vedic and the Upanishadic scholars, who is seen only in deep contemplation by the great mystic saints and seers, and yet whose infinite nature remains unknown even to the celestials. Friends, rarely do we get the special privilege of getting the senior Swamis of the Ramakrishna order, particularly those people who have the blessed privilege of sitting under the feet of the direct disciples, who are men of realization, who have got deep spiritual insight. And one of those Swamis is our guest this morning, revered Swami Akhilananda. Perhaps some of you know him, but yet I think for the people who have not been here before, I would like to say a very few words. The revered Swami is the founder president of the Boston Ramakrishna Vedanta Society, and also he is the founder of the Providence Center. He has been in this country for more than 30 years, and even when he came with the blessings of those Swamis. They sent him as if he was a special messenger to carry the special message of revered Sri Ramakrishna. The Swami has been here working for so many years. He wrote some books, and by his special approach of human problems and the value of religion, I consider he is really well qualified to deal with a subject like can we know God. He has personal touch with Swami Brahmananda, about whom you must have heard quite often from Swami Paramananda. So there can be no special introduction. With these few words, I request Swami.
Swami and friends, it is indeed a great privilege for me to be here. Unfortunately, my dear brother, Swami Paramananda, is not here, as you know. But we have other two Swamis here. So indeed, it is a great joy for me to be here and to visit with them and with the devotees of the center. I had the pleasure of coming to this place many times. In fact, when the temple was dedicated, I had the pleasure of being present here. When I enter into this temple, it reminds me of that occasion. Naturally, it gives me a great joy to be here this morning and to exchange our ideas. The Swami selected a topic. It is very interesting and enjoyable for all of us. Can we see God? This question is asked by everyone in this world. You will seldom find a man who does not think about that. Though he may claim that he is an agnostic or atheist, yet there comes a time when a question arises in his mind. When that cruel death takes away his or her beloved one, he or she wonders where is my son, or where is my husband, or where is my wife? Is there anything really real in this changeable world? Just now it reminds me of a very interesting episode happened in a conference about 5 years ago. A very outstanding scientist, retired from the Middle West and was living in Florida. He came to this conference of the Society for Scientific Study of Religion. And we have a custom that there will be speakers, discussions in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. Then we have what they call owl session at 10 o'clock. And this session will last from 10 to practically 1 o'clock. That particular morning, this elderly gentleman spoke from so-called materialistic point of view or atheistic point of view, and he severely criticized Judeo-Christian conception of God and ridiculed. He had some justification, no doubt. When you think of some of the old traditions about God who sits in heaven and sitting there and punishes or gives some rewards according to their faith or belief or trust and so on and so forth. So he was ridiculed. During the owl session, the president of the organization happened to be another very outstanding scientist. First thing he did, he asked me to discuss the problems that were discussed in the morning by this great scientist, Dr. So-and-so. So first thing, he's an elderly man, he was about 80 years old. I didn't have any heart to hurt this man's feelings. So I, in a smiling way, I asked Dr. So-and-so, do you ever wonder about yourself? You want to know who you are? What will happen after that disappearance, or it is over there, as some of the materialistic thinkers say? Oh yes, I do. I wonder about that. Oh, I see. Do you also think about the universe? Is there anything really real behind this changeable world? As that day also, or that rather night, a very great astronomer was discussing about the galaxies, how many galaxies are there, and he showed our Earth like a tiny thing in comparison with some of these galaxies. Nothing but little tiny thing in the picture. Oh yes, I wonder about that too. Of course I do. I want to know if there is anything really real or everything is only changeable. Oh, Dr. So-and-so, you are not an atheist, as you tried to prove this morning. You may be at most an agnostic. Maybe you are a Buddhist. He began to laugh. He said, did you notice that I didn't criticize Buddhism? Yes, I noticed it. So I say, you may be a Buddhist. Now, though he is supposed to be a materialist, supposed to be atheist, even he wondered. Perhaps some of you know what happened to Sir Oliver Lodge when his little boy Raymond passed away. He was a product of 19th century science. Yet he began to wonder, what happened to my son? So you see, this question arises in our minds. Is there anything really real? We may not say God, but we may ask, is there anything permanent here? After hearing or reading the papers and hearing and discussing with Dr. Harlow Shapley, we cannot help wondering about that. The changeable world, yet there must be something permanent. You will be glad to know I read a speech delivered by the last Pope when he dedicated the Papal Academy of Advancement of Science. The speech was brought by this Dr. Shapley. He was there, he was invited as a guest. You will be surprised if you read this speech until you go to the last 2 pages. You will think it was delivered by a scientist. He declared that this universe has been going on at least for more than 5,000 million years. Can you believe it? He could say that, did say. He couldn't help after knowing the facts that are discovered nowadays by the astronomers and so on. So we wonder, can we see God? Every man and woman, sometime or other, would wonder about it. I may not say every man and woman, most of the people would wonder. Of course, as you know, in this age of television culture, people are very little interested in something permanent. They are interested in, the things. But still, there comes a time they wonder, is there anything behind me, behind this changeable world? Rationally speaking, we cannot help accepting the existence of what they call absolute. They may not use the term God. Eddington, in his book Philosophy of Physical Science, established the idea that there must be absolute in order to understand the relativity. Same thing was done by Schrödinger, that great nuclear physicist in Germany. In his little book, What is Life? He goes a step further. He says that we are compelled to accept the existence of universal consciousness. Here in California, you have a great astronomer. In his book, Stromberg, in his book, What is Life? Left in my mind the book, name of the book. Oh, Soul of the Universe. He declares that there must be a soul behind this universe. Rationally, we are compelled to accept the existence of absolute or permanent entity or reality or something like that. You may not call it God. But a question arises. Theologically, philosophically, it may be true. How do I know that it is true? Many theories are changed nowadays, you know. The conception of matter is changed, astronomical theories are changed. How do I know? 1,000 years later, we may have facts, we don't have to accept the existence of absolute. We can challenge that. But when we have empirical evidences, we cannot deny. You must have seen in the notice that a Swami would come here from Boston. You didn't know what that thing is, what kind of person he is, and whether he will really come. You didn't know that. Now you are seeing that man. You say, yes, there is a man. You can say that yes, I saw the man. You can tell your friends that yes, I saw the man. He is like this or like that, and so on and so forth. That's all. But if you do not have empirical evidences, you cannot be sure about that. So we ask, can we see God? Let me give you another interesting discussion I had with a very outstanding scientist about 5 years ago. We belong to a group they call Conference on Science, Philosophy and Religion. We meet in New York, generally speaking. And my friend, who happened to be a very outstanding scientist, and he and I have a habit of going away at the time of break and sit in a corner or somewhere or have a cup of tea or something like that and discuss things. That year, he just returned from, or a few months ago, he returned from Princeton, and Eddington discussed with him something very interesting. Eddington said, you know, so-and-so, I do not have any glimpse of the absolute. But Eddington has it. Einstein said that to my friend. Eddington has it. Einstein said, I don't have it. My friend asked me, can we scientists have that experience, or can we know God? A very challenging question. I at once said, yes, certainly. You scientists can have experience of God. You are already trained. Verify the existence of God. You can. Certainly you can. And my friend is one of the greatest scientists in this world. He has been invited all over the world, and even though he retired 2-3 years ago, he has been lecturing in about 50-55 universities and colleges every year. So you can understand what position he has. Even that man asked, can we see God? Naturally, you and I also ask, can we see God? And how can we see? As this gentleman discussed with me, how can we see God? Seeing God is a very peculiar expression. If that reality is absolute, as philosophers established, how can I see absolute? Absolute must be beyond name, form, qualities, attributes. How can I see if he has no form, no name, no qualities? How can I see him? Is a question. Our answer is that there are various realizations, we may say, of that absolute. In one stage, we perceive directly and immediately. We can perceive that. In other states, we don't have that perception, that sense, but we have the realization. We shall discuss it a little later. Now again, this very experience of God is rather confusing nowadays. I am going to tell you something. Some of you may not accept or may not agree with me. In this part of the country, there are persons who are advocating that you can have what they call mystic experiences with the help of drugs. In fact, I came to know recently that 2 or 3 important businessmen have been coming to this part of the country to have mystic experiences from New York. A friend of mine who is acquainted with these 3 men reported to me. He happened to be one of the deans of a very important educational institution. And he challenges me also that can we have mystic realization with drugs and liquor and so on. So, this is a confusing thing. When we say that we have the realization or we have mystic experiences, and some people will say, yes, take a little drug, you'll have it. No, you don't have it. You may have a kind of hypnotic spell, but you do not have any perception of God or reality. Let them say anything they like. You can take it for granted. Drugs or liquor or any such thing will not produce you what we are talking about, God realization or experience of God. No, certainly not. Years ago, this experiment was made in India. They found out that, hundreds of years ago, they found out that when you take liquor or drug, a little, you can stimulate your predominant tendency. Suppose you have anger, you become very haughty then. Or you have sweet temperament, you become very sweet. You express as you know what happens. But it doesn't give you realization. Then they reject it completely. And they said also, it has a very bad effect in your neurovascular system. As you all know, that if you begin to take drugs, what happens? I had a very sad experience just before I left New York. A daughter of a friend of ours, young woman, married, became drug addict. Serious situations arose. I called up a friend of mine, a psychiatrist, to handle her. Drug can do it. And her boyfriend became so violent that he was about to murder the mother-in-law. It was a serious situation. And it can happen. It is not the fault of this girl or that girl or this man and that woman. If you begin to take drugs, you can become addict. And then your whole neurovascular system can be seriously damaged. We know it. I have been handling some alcoholics, some drug addicts. I know what happens. The pathetic state. However, even though these men are saying that you can have mystic experience, I cannot help telling you, no. Recently a book is published by an English writer, Mysticism, Mundane and Sacred and Profane. I think this is the title. If I am not mistaken about the title, I had to read the book. Important scientist brought to me to make comments. So I had to glance through anyway. I didn't read the whole book. I had to read something anyway. But, however, you cannot have this experience of God with the help of drugs and liquor or something like that. Now, how can we experience God? In the first place, we have to train our mind. Mind must be unified, integrated. Then alone, there is a possibility of experience of God. Perhaps many of you read a conversation that Swami Vivekananda had with Ramakrishna. Swami Vivekananda, as a boy, was a product of 19th century thought current. He read Herbert Spencer, John Stuart Mill, all these English philosophers, and so on. Naturally, he was rather skeptical in that sense. When he came to Sri Ramakrishna, first he was discussing, he asked him, "Sir, have you seen God?" Sri Ramakrishna answered, "Yes, I see him more vividly than I see you, and you can see him." So, that was a very inspiring statement. And if you met the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, you would understand how they encourage people. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. They had highest spiritual realizations. In fact, one of the disciples told us one day that all of us had samadhi during his lifetime. After meeting these great men, that the traditional Christians or Jewish mystics or Sufi Islamic people or Buddhists had such realization. Take for instance St. Paul. St. Paul was very critical, as you all know, of Jesus. On the road to Damascus, he had certain experience. He became oblivious of the whole world, forgot the world completely. And that experience changed him thoroughly, and he became practically the founder of Christianity. Just imagine, a man who hated Jesus was totally changed. This is a very important symptom of real mysticism. These drug addicts don't change their personality. You can take it for granted. They may say that I have mystic experience, or you can have it, but their personalities are not changed at all. They're the same person as they used to be. On the other hand, St. Paul was a totally changed man. St. Francis of Assisi returned from the military trip, from Sicily, and came to Assisi, back to his hometown. Went to a little church. He had that experience, he could not go back to his family. He was the son of a wealthy merchant, and his habit was eat, drink and be merry, sing and dance, that sort of things he had. He could not go even back to his home after that experience. Saint Ignatius, after that experience, he was a totally changed man. Saint Augustine. If you study the lives of other great personalities belonging to different religions, you will find that the validity of their experiences lies in their change of personality. They become loving, kind, forgiving, and they couldn't do the things that they used to do. Emotionally, they are integrated. All the glorious qualities that you and I discuss are visible in their life. That is the real proof of real experience of God. When a man sees God, his personality is changed. He is no longer the same man. You can take it for granted. Study the lives of all these great mystics belonging to different religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islamic religion, or Hinduism, Buddhism. You will find that they are the same. There is no difference in their personality. Now, most of us are not properly trained just now. Even though we are trained, we are by nature emotional. We may talk of science, philosophy, and religion, but we live the life of emotion. Naturally, we want to have some emotional satisfaction. When we say, can we see God? We mean, can we see personified God? Can we see Jesus? Can we see Madonna? Can we see Buddha? Or Krishna or somebody like that? Can we see him? Because most of us are still on this plane of name, form, qualities and attributes. So we like to have experience of personified aspect of God. We can have it, provided we go through training process. Most of the people want to have it just overnight. We understand there are persons who even come from India who claim that you can have it, say, immediately, 2 days or week, 2 weeks or something like that, If you pay $10 and you can learn this secret and you can have it. No, my friend, it is not possible. In order to be a scientist, you have to go through a training process. You cannot become a scientist overnight. You first hear the lecture, understand the basic principles of science, then you go to the laboratory, make experiments, verify them, and you know it. It is true. Similarly, mere theological or philosophical understanding of God will not give you the realization of God. If it were so, then during the last 2 world wars, you would not have the so-called religious people behaving the way they behaved. The amazing and sad story, to tell you frankly. And I was very much humiliated by a prominent doctor who happened to be president at that time of Medical Association of East Coast side, challenged me one day. Swami, how can you explain the behavior of some persons in South America? When they came to South America, they had to be monks. When the Indians did not like to be converted, they were killed by these fellows, saying their souls are being saved by skill. And this medical scientist had right to challenge me. How can you explain this? If you say religion changes your personality, you say that religion makes you loving, kind, forgiving, patient, and so on, how can you explain this brutality? And during the last world wars, many theologians advocated war. This is our cause, as Karl Barth wrote a letter to Churchill. Or as Niebuhr wrote books and so on and so forth, proving that this is the thing should be done, fight, kill, and so on. Now, the challenger. Our answer is the theological and philosophical understanding of God will not give you realization of God. You have to make experiments as the scientists do, empirically. You have to train yourself. What is the training process? The main basis of training process is training the mind. Our minds are very restless, as you will know. I don't have to tell you how restless the minds are. Swami Brahmananda used to say the minds are like monkeys. Monkeys are by nature very restless. Then imagine the monkey drank little wine. On the top of it, monkey was stung by a scorpion. You can understand how restless the monkey would be. Our nature is like that. By nature, our minds are restless. On the top of it, we drink the wine of enjoyment, hedonism, sense enjoyment. Eat, drink, and be merry. Or get more automobiles, new gadgets, new televisions, new washing machines, and so on and so forth. The desire is there, stimulated by advertisement and television process. Then we are stung by the scorpion of ego. I, so and so. Naturally, our minds are restless. Now, this restless mind must be trained. Can we train, as my friend asked me, the scientist? Can we have it? Our answer is yes. All of us can train our mind. Though everyone will have to take different methods, his own method or her own method, but still you have to take the methods or method to train the mind, to make the mind one-pointed and single. Suppose you are very emotional, as most of us are. Then the Hindu teachers or Saint Ignatius and such other personalities will tell us, establish a loving relationship with God, thereby integrate your emotions, unify your emotions. And if you are active, they will tell you, perform your duties in the spirit of service and worship, dedication. Suppose you are agnostic or Southern School of Buddhist, then they will tell you that do things without caring for the result. Do efficiently. Don't figure out the result. What do I get out of it? Or what appreciation I will get it or recognition. No. Work for the sake of work. And if you do that, gradually you will find your mind will become one-pointed single. It happens. If you study the Buddhistic tradition, then you will find out that many Buddhists perform the work only. Or if you study some of the Hindus, you will find out that they did the same thing. Perhaps they perform duty as a housewife or a butcher, as you all know. I don't have to tell you the story. They realize the highest truth because thereby they integrated the mind, unified the mind, made the mind one-pointed. That very moment, truth revealed itself. So, different individuals coming from different historical background or tradition and also having different emotional structures will have to follow different methods. You cannot say, this is the method. No. If you say that, you'll drive away people from your religion, as it happened in the Western world. Many people gave up religion because it was said, this is the way. If you don't follow this, you'll go to hell. That's all it is. Naturally, a scientist cannot trust that. He cannot accept that there is a hell or heaven. He doesn't find any evidence. So naturally, he challenges. That is the very reason we are having the troubles in the contemporary world. Because religion was forced on people in a dogmatic way. You say, no, you follow your own method and you can verify. But you must be very careful that you follow your method. Not merely say that, yes, I go to the church or synagogue or mosque or temple. No. But follow training process. Get instruction from a man or woman who has the training process himself or herself, who train himself or herself, and follow the method, not in a dogmatic way, but in a rational way. Then you will find mind will become changed. Structure will change gradually. Then your mind will be unified, integrated. That very moment, truth will reveal itself. You can see God, personal aspect of God. Then there are other stages. We are not satisfied by mere seeing personal God. Any of us are not satisfied. We want to know the absolute, the ultimate reality. Question would arise here, well, you are talking something very conflicting, confusing. You say seeing God and then you say absolute. What is the difference between God and absolute? Unfortunately, there are various conceptions of God, and there will be. You can help it. That ultimate reality is absolute. When our finite minds try to understand that absolute, it will have its own limitations. Take for instance this temple. When you look at the temple from the front side, it will appear in one way. From this side, it will appear another way. From that side, another way. From the back, it will appear another way. But all these are the views or pictures of the same reality or absolute, or this temple. So, there will be differences in the conception of the absolute when we talk of God. There will be difference. Nevertheless, when we proceed in our training process, we first have the perception of God as a personal being. There is no real conflict there, as Swami Akhilananda elaborated from the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, that in the ocean, infinite ocean, there are icebergs. Icebergs are not different from the ocean. Icebergs are the congealed states of the infinite ocean. In one stage, you call it iceberg. In another state, you call it ocean, water, infinite, and so on. Same thing happens in religious life. In one state, we perceive God as a personal being. We say we see God. We see Jesus. We see Madonna. We see Buddha. We see Krishna. We see Ramakrishna, and so on. Now, there are persons who are satisfied with that. They don't like to go further. Perfectly all right. Let them be satisfied there. But there are persons who want to go beyond that. In Christian tradition, I cannot give you better example than Mr. Eckhart or Saint Dionysius. Mr. Eckhart, actually, he said, I renounce God for God's sake. Means, he identified himself with the absolute. He went beyond the name and form. That we call the realization of the absolute, or we call samadhi. there are three forms of samadhi. In one form of samadhi or superconscious state, a person perceives a personal God. He remains oblivious of the world and also his body. He only perceives that entity, that personified God. And thou become one. There is no separateness. Poor Master Eckhart was so much misunderstood by his people that he was sent to jail and he died in jail. If you are in India, you will not be sent in jail. Because what he said was not sacrilegious, was another stage of realization. That was all right. It was the identification of the iceberg and ocean water, or identification of the little waves as you and I are, bubbles, little bubbles, and the infinite ocean. That's all. Now, that stage can be reached by persons who want to reach that. There are persons, as I said, who would not like to go there. They say, I want to enjoy sugar, I don't want to become sugar. They want to enjoy God. They want to keep up separateness so that they can love God or enjoy God. They don't want to go beyond that. But there are persons who want to go beyond. And they realize the second stage of samadhi or superconscious experience, that is identified completely. In the third stage, Swami Brahmananda said it is called blissful samadhi, blissful state. It cannot be discussed. It is beyond this duality and unity. It has to be realized. That's all it is. You cannot describe. You can't describe. There is no word, there is no language to describe that state. However, let us start with the first stage of samadhi or experience of God. As most of us are, we want to perceive personal God. Of course, the scientists, as I mentioned, two of them I know, they would not do that at all. If they have to, one is doing something, and if they have to do something, they would want to have understanding of the absolute, no personification. They cannot. They refuse to do that. Perfectly all right. However, most of us have to start with the perception of the personified aspect of God. And you and I, all of us, can have it. There is no question of whether you are a Jew or Christian, man or woman, white or dark, Asiatic or American, Russian or German, no question is there. By virtue of our birth, by the very nature of human constitution, we all have the possibility. But, there is a big but, we have to go through this training process, as I mentioned already. We have to be patient. One problem will arise here. Especially in this country, you forgive me my saying, people want to have everything overnight. Whether it is by drug or by money or something, overnight. You can't have it. No. You can't have the experience of God overnight. So we have to be patient with ourselves, knowing our present condition. I cannot blame anyone personally. It is unfortunately the situation of human existence. We see things, automobile, television, house, flower, jewels, dress, suit, and so on. We like to have them. So our minds are attracted by them. We don't see God. How can I think of Him? It's a very serious question. So there will be a problem that we cannot train our mind because we don't see Him. We don't feel attraction. We may like to. We may read books. We may hear sermons. We may intellectually understand, yet our present state of existence attracts us to those things. Naturally, when we sit for the training process, say called meditation, our mind goes away to the things that we perceived yesterday. Then worst thing is that we are here with accumulated tendencies from our past experiences. The unconscious mind keeps all the past experiences. Naturally, those unconscious tendencies make our mind restless. So, Swami Brahmananda used to tell us, slow but steady. Training process must be followed slowly but steadily. You will say, why should I slowly follow? The reason is this. If you do not slowly follow it, your mind will not get used to it. As a result, there is a possibility of reaction. I have seen in this country many persons having reaction. They show interest, oh, I want to have it. A month or 2 or 6 months, then throw it overboard. It happens. I can blame anyone. I will say, unfortunately, they just rush towards it. Get it this way. And naturally, the reaction came. Swami Brahmananda used to say, when the boys complain about their meditation, until they practice for about 2 years, I don't say anything. Afterwards, they come and say, yes, Maharaj, I can meditate a little. It is true that if you steadily practice for 2-3 years, gradually mind gets settled. All the accumulated tendencies of the past will be dropped. It's a very interesting thing. We don't realize all of it. How many accumulated tendencies we have. And then we add to them in our present day life. So naturally mind remains restless. So we have to be patient. And slowly practice. Meditation, concentration, or prayer, contemplation, whatever you call. If you do that slowly, steadily, for 2-3 years, then you get interest. You become attracted. Some of you are mothers, and some of you are husbands, wives. You know that you don't have to struggle to think of your son or daughter or husband, wife. This is a loving relationship. Your thought spontaneously goes to it, to him or her. And naturally, we do not see God. We cannot have that loving relationship. We don't feel that attraction. So, in the earlier days, we have to struggle. And you don't have to struggle. Spontaneously, you think of God. When you are washing dishes, or wiping dishes, or cleaning the floor, or doing banking work, teaching, or nursing, or legal work, spontaneously your mind will go there. Very interesting. You try it and you see that. Spontaneously will go there. Then you and I can see him. Once we see, our life becomes blessed. Actually blessed. Our personality is full of joy, full of peace. In this changeable world, there are unfortunate incidents, we admit. Even though they are existing, yet your mind will become peaceful. The changeable conditions of life will not have any permanent effect. Goes off. And you'll be happy. Above all, most important thing is that you are happy, no doubt, but can you do anything for others? A friend of mine happened to be a wife of a theologian. We are friends for the last several years, 15, 20 years. And she used to challenge me very much. Swami, you talk about spiritual practices, experience of God. Are not you selfish? That you are to enjoy God? Instead of that, you should do welfare work. She is a very nice person, mature person now. She has been doing wonderful welfare work. I admit that, but she totally changed now. Our answer was, where do you learn your welfare work? Who taught you? First thing you learned, I am to be theologian's wife. I said, you learn from the teachings of Jesus. Love God, love neighbor. Why did he say love God first, instead of saying love neighbor? There is some profound meaning behind that. You cannot really love neighbors unless you really love God. I don't have time to give illustrations. You will be amazed how these welfare workers go with the wind. They mean well when they started their welfare work, and they went with the wind. One example I will give is Stalin. He was being trained for ministry. He felt for the poor people. He wanted to make the poor people free. Then he joined this communist party. He became a leader. Now what happened to him? Instead of making the people free, he made them slaves. He became worse than Tsar. And it is bound to be. I cannot blame him. I blame the philosophy of life or way of life. So we say that if we do not have understanding of that goal, love of God or knowledge of God or experience of God, your welfare work will go with the wind. I can give you many sad illustrations. So we say we are not selfish. When we say we want to experience God, we really want to expand. Consider Swami Vivekananda. You heard of him, and quite a little I know you know about him. Can you find out another man who loved the world so much as he did, and how he wanted to remove the sufferings of mankind? I don't have time. I could have told you one illustration of his heartache for the people. So we say that if you want to do good to the world or welfare work, first try to see God, love God. Then you become a lover of mankind, lover of the world. You are not only a lover of the world, you radiate that love. Anyone meets you cannot help feeling your love, your peace, your joy. So this is the real blessing of the world. May He, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jews, Allah of the Islams, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Chinese, Ahura Mazda of Zoroastrians, and Brahma of the Hindus, reveal Himself unto us. May He grant us abiding peace and bliss. Peace, 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 be unto us.